The education system in India is a 100-meter race on steroids.
तैयारी शुरू करी आप कितने साल के थे?
सर उस समय हम 18 साल के थे।
और अभी
हम 30 साल के हो गए।
30 साल। पिछले 12 सालों में आपने अपनी ज़िंदगी में क्या किया है?
ज़िंदगी में सर पढ़ते गया, डिग्री लेते गया। मैंने 3 सब्जेक्ट में पोस्ट ग्रेजुएट किया, बीएड किया, सीटेट क्वालिफाइड है, नेट क्वालिफाइड है सर।
The system has told a lot of children, you will sit there, you will listen to what I say, and you will answer the paper, and that is your education. Kids know information is no longer a premium, quite significantly through the internet.
What you've observed in the last 25 years?
Those are questions that Agastya is trying to encourage kids to ask, interacting with the content rather than just absorbing.
How tough initially was it to get accepted? The parents felt, okay, we can send our children to this school, and though it's not the regular textbook studies, but they're doing something.
It was never about this child will go and do something brilliant. It was more about this child will find their identity and will find a better way of approaching problems.
How different this center is than from any other school or any other science center?
Start asking why. The what is now very clear.
Dr. Kalam himself visited the center and he asked you to set something up in Bihar as well. It following the ancient systems of Gurukul that has always worked for India. How many success stories do you have?
I have a few extra sessions with them typically. I will request the school if those kids can be sent sometimes to campus. We found that these kids have an enrollment rate into college of about 98%.
5 million kids every year passing out. Uttishthata jagrata prapya varanni bodhat. Arise, awake and strive for knowledge. नमस्कार। हम सभी एजुकेशन सिस्टम पर उंगलियां उठाते हैं। रोज़ पढ़ाने के तौर तरीकों को लेकर खूब चर्चाएं होती हैं, पर एक निराशा के साथ ये सभी चर्चाएं समाप्त हो जाती हैं। इस देश में एजुकेशन का कुछ नहीं हो सकता। दैट इज़ द एटीट्यूड। हो सकता है, करने वाला जुनून चाहिए। आज हम बात कर रहे हैं एक ऐसे मिशन की जो सिर्फ इंस्पायरिंग नहीं, अर्जेंट भी है। जब हमारा स्कूल सिस्टम रोट लर्निंग, एग्ज़ाम प्रेशर और क्रिएटिविटी की कमी से जूझ रहा है, अगस्त्य इस पूरी कहानी को बदल रहा है। अगस्त्य एक मूवमेंट है जो गांव से आ रहे बच्चों को, इकोनॉमिकली वीकर सेक्शंस के लाखों करोड़ों बच्चों को एक साइंटिफिक टेम्परामेंट डेवलप करने का एक्सपोजर दे रहा है। आज हमारे साथ अगस्त्य की कहानी को शेयर कर रहे हैं ऑथर और अगस्त्य के ट्रस्टी अधिरथ सेठी जी। ये कहानी है मोबाइल साइंस लैब्स, टीचर ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन, बेयरफुट साइंटिस्ट्स और एक कैंपस की जो एक क्लासरूम से ज़्यादा एक इमेजिनेशन का वंडरलैंड है। द मूविंग ऑफ माउंटेन्स नाम की किताब पर बेस्ड हम आज पूछेंगे, क्या है सबसे बड़ी कमी हमारे एजुकेशन सिस्टम में? इनोवेशन क्यों ज़रूरी है, स्पेशली आज के तौर पर, और कैसे जगाई जा सकती है एक क्यूरियोसिटी एक ऐसे बच्चे में जिसके पास बेसिक लैब तक नहीं है? इस एपिसोड को आखिर तक ज़रूर देखिएगा, क्योंकि ये सिर्फ एजुकेशन का पॉडकास्ट नहीं, एक नए भारत की सीखने की कहानी है। अधिरथ जी, आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है द इंडिक पेन उत्तिष्ठ भारत सीरीज में।
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here.
Let me begin from where this all started with Ramji, and that is where the core question is of the challenges that we are facing in education system currently. You have in the book mentioned that the education system in India is a 100-meter race on steroids. इसका मतलब क्या है? What were you trying to imply, and why such a strong statement?
Well, see, what the foundation found out in its earliest stages when it was analyzing what could be done about education. And when the founders themselves from good backgrounds who have gone through schools where they were lucky enough to have things like creativity, curiosity, innovation thrust upon them as concepts, and found that these were missing in most of the Indian schools.
True.
Primarily the government schools, but even if you look at some of the city schools, kids, I think from maybe 7th or 8th standard just start learning. It's rote learning. You learn your subject, you learn it back and forth. I remember doing history, for example, and having passages memorized because you knew if I put that passage in my
It's going to
paper.
be right. Yeah,
Exactly.
I know we've all gone through that.
We know,
Yeah.
and we know them now also. I can recite some of them because it was so ingrained.
True.
And it's given us a lot to think about in terms of, is rote learning good or bad? And we say it's bad. But yes, there is some value in repetition. That's true. You can't learn a script in a play, for example, unless you repeat it over and over again. But going from there to understanding the concepts behind what's going on. Children should not be left hanging at that point of saying, we've taught you calculus, we've taught you history, we've taught you this. But nobody here is asking, why was any of this relevant? So when we say it's a 100-meter race on steroids, what we're saying is children are being told, learn this, mug it up, as we were very commonly said when we were in school, and you go and regurgitate it on your exam paper, and that's the end of education. So a lot of kids leave high school with that notion that I've finished, I don't need to know this anymore. A lot of kids enter college and go through graduation with the same notion. People leave engineering not actually as engineers, but as people who have just got a degree and who've managed to somehow answer all the questions on that paper. So when Dr. P.K. Iyengar, who's one of the founders and part of the Atomic Energy Commission, the chairman in fact, his lamentation at that time was, we've met a lot of engineers from Indian colleges with great degrees who've come highly recommended by their teachers. But when we ask them practical things about science, when we ask them, okay, how would you solve this problem? They're completely stumped. So unless it pertains exactly to what they were doing or what they were taught, they're not able to give us a creative answer. And that's where the whole idea of, okay, if we can infuse creativity back into the system and find a way to start asking why. The what is now very clear. Kids know information is no longer a premium. It's been democratized quite significantly through the internet. But asking why, asking what if, asking what does it mean to say when something like this happens, those are questions that Agastya is trying to encourage kids to ask. And it is difficult because the system has told a lot of children, you will sit there, you will listen to what I say, and you will answer the paper, and that is your education. So changing that has been a very challenging thing that Agastya has been doing, and doing quite well, I think, for the last 25 years.
There are two things that come out of this. The first being probably what I would like to first bring into this conversation is delve a little more into what Iyengar, Mr. Iyengar, Professor Iyengar actually shared. He always lamented about not having a scientific temper. It's part of our constitution. It's been 77 years. We know what the problem is. We know, as you very rightly said, there's democratization of information and knowledge. So there's no longer inaccessible, so to say. And yet, most of the schools, and it's not just about sarkari government schools, but also private schools and public schools are struggling with it. One, what is Agastya doing which is bringing about a difference and inculcating that scientific temperament? Before I go on to the next question, let's start from there.
So Agastya started by asking, what are we trying to do when we educate a child? And as I said, is it a knowledge transfer? It was maybe at one time, absolutely, but it's no longer that. So when we started with the first three pillars that we decided were important, which was curiosity, creativity, and innovative spirit, the idea was, okay, these are very, very critical to a child's thinking beyond what they're learning in their textbooks. And so Agastya used science and STEM education, science models, to bring out, in a sense, the practical awareness that a child might have in terms of, okay, you've learned how the combustion engine works, for example, but here's how a piston actually moves inside a car. And when the child sees that in a visual kind of way, then it opens up a different part of their brains. But the interesting thing is that wasn't the whole story. Because the moment they started doing this, the moment they started encouraging kids to ask why, especially girl children, suddenly they said, wait, there's a whole other gear here, wherein these kids are more confident, they show more caring to their peers. They're able to actually, when we did peer-to-peer learning, we realized empathy is becoming a big part of how these kids interact with each other. And that changed so now there's 5 pillars. So it's curiosity, creativity, innovative spirit, caring, and confidence. And the confidence is something that these kids take back home with them. It is, as we say, it's an identity transformation. It's not about what did the child learn. It's what does the child come to believe about themselves through the learning process. So we went about saying as you said, the journey that you take, the scientific method, as we've always called it, of analyzing a problem, thinking through what the solution could be, is more important than the answer itself. I would rather a child takes that journey and comes to the wrong answer, but then is spoon-fed the right answer and then goes about saying, I know A, B, C, D, E, because that's still not really, creativity at work. And so Agastya has done this extremely well, and we've seen various anecdotes of kids going back and changing their circumstance, not necessarily using science, but using the thought process they've developed through Agastya's methods.
So Agastya is primarily working with children from rural and economically weaker sections. But this is a problem which, as even a student probably of regular economically well-to-do family also faces in school. If we look at translating this into schools across, how difficult it is to inculcate this kind of experiential learning which you are trying to bring forth.
Yeah.
What is the age group that Agastya actually caters to?
Yes, we do reach out to private schools as well. Agastya has a beautiful campus in Gurukul, near Kuppam, and that campus is open to schools, private schools, and we have a lot of kids coming there for what's called the camps on campus. So they come, they spend 3 or 4 days there, and they get an idea of what Agastya does and how it works. And it's true, a lot of them are equally amazed, saying, we can have this in our schools. Of course, the bulk and the urgency, you could say, is more in the rural areas, because these kids don't even have access to an iota of what some of the kids in city schools might have. And yes, you may be in a school that is prioritizing rote learning, you may be in a school that is a good school that still says, look, all we care about is all the kids here should get 95 and above. But you still have access to, especially even through your parents, even through your elders, forms of learning that maybe inculcate a different kind of thinking. We've realized that if we had to take a call, then obviously it is the government schools and the underserved communities that we'd like to start with. It would be amazing if a lot of the other schools incorporated it, and many of them have. I think Agastya has been extremely inspirational and has made ties with a lot of very, very esteemed institutions. And they've seen what we do and they've tried to incorporate to an extent in their own schools. But the here and now issue, I would say, is still with rural India. And that's where we're trying to change both the mindset as well as the experience that children have with their education.
So let's delve deeper into the rural India and the children, the kind of challenges that they face. Your 5 pillars, one of the pillars is confidence. And there's a beautiful story of Uma in the book that actually elucidates it, while I would also like you to share that story in order for our viewers to understand better कि confidence की क्या ज़रूरत है और क्यों ऐसी कमी रहती है. जहाँ तक मुझे समझ आया, what I understood and realized is economic inequality definitely एक major reason है confidence ना होने का. It's not like they're not bright. It's not like they're not intelligent. I went back to my my ancestral village after my father passed away. And I started interacting more with the folks there. I keep going back. And I realized they are super bright children because, they still are not corrupted by the things that probably city-bred children are. So they are very focused, super bright, but there is a lack of, they need more in order to understand things better, in order to have better experiences, in order to hone up their skills. ये बताइए, what is the biggest challenge to their confidence? What you've observed in the last 25 years, apart from economic inequality maybe?
I mean, it starts with economic inequality, obviously. And we have a hierarchical system, you could say, even in the classroom. So girls will tend not to speak up too much. I think that's a big problem we faced in the beginning.
India.
They just would not put their hands up. And you want to encourage them, but how do you, reverse centuries, I would say, of legacy thinking? Many of them have parents who are not able to encourage them, either because economically or because they themselves have not come through any kind of education where they can tell them this is how it works. So I think that has been extremely challenging. And other than that, I think it's when you see how quickly the thinking changes when these children are just given a taste of what it could mean to stand out, to have your question be applauded by a teacher, to be encouraged to back answer even to the teacher and say, no, why are you saying that? You've explained it, but I'm not clear. We take it for granted in city schools or, some schools growing up, you're encouraged to say, look, argue with me if you want. You won't see that in villages. You won't see it because there is a fixed system of, I'm going to teach and you're going to listen.
Right.
And I think Uma is the one who said, I'm not afraid to speak up anymore, right? Which was a very important thing. It was the first time I think Agastya came across this thing of confidence and then started exploring and realizing, oh gosh, a lot of these kids are having similar experiences. They're going home, they're voicing their opinions, and because they're getting an education, some of those opinions are extremely valid. So the story of Shravani and the cows is something we love telling because it is an absolute case study in, you could say, even design thinking, in that there were no resources for her to play around with. Her family was going to sell their only cow because they didn't have money. And she was one of Agastya's young instructor leaders. And she convinced her parents to say, can you please just hold on? And convinced her mother to take a few more shifts. I think she was doing sewing or something like that. Told the father, if you can just hold on for a little while. The cow gave birth to calves. Milk started coming in from the cow. As the calves grew up a little bit, that started becoming, I think, an income source in itself. And then the entire circumstance changed. Now, unfortunately, the underserved and the disadvantaged communities, a lot of them don't even see past tomorrow's problems. They're not able to.
True.
So it's very reactive. And when you've gone through the scientific process, when you've seen what 3 or 4 or 5 stages of thinking can do, it just makes you that much more confident to speak up and say, yes, I think I have an alternate solution that might actually help. And in her case, it was, she came and gave a speech and said, poverty is a state of mind. And I'm not going to say that real poverty is not crushing and sometimes inescapable. But a lot of these kids have shown that we're able to make meaningful changes in our own lives just by the way that we've been taught to think by Agastya.
See, the first access of any person coming from rural area is the government. I mean, whether it is about food, whether it is about any schemes, it's all coming through government. And when that access is there, how much of an effort does it take for an organization like yours to get included and become part of that access? And how, that change, while we do see innumerable stories in your book, obviously because in 25 years there have been so many success stories that you can talk about, but how tough initially was it to get accepted in the scheme of things? I mean, especially it's about trust. It's about the first set of people trusting the organization to be part of it.
I think, see, one thing you have to understand is there are here and now problems beyond education, and there's a lot of them in India.
True.
So when we were interviewing folks, a lot of the donors were saying that, look, it's difficult to give money for education upfront or for that to be our number one priority when clearly poverty is a huge issue, nutrition, healthcare, food. So if someone says I can feed a child for 100 rupees today versus I can give a child a model, it's unimaginable to think you would choose the latter, right? Because what can the child do if its stomach is empty? It's not going to enjoy learning anything. So even where the government is concerned, that is their number one priority, and it should be, I think. Agastya was coming at a time when even educated folks were saying, look, I understand that you think education is kind of falling behind, or that rote learning and this kind of exam-based answerism, as we called it, is not good in the long run. But A, we have more pressing problems. And B is, by and large, we are churning out smart kids. So India was known for generally being, we've always been known, thankfully. And we've always had a good culture of education, that it's prized, intellect is prized here, and it always has been. And so we've never been a culture where a parent who could afford, for example, to send their kid to school or college would say it's not important, right? So it came down to the ones who couldn't afford or the ones who had no access to that kind of education. So the government, the moment they saw the initial workshops that Agastya was doing, and we did a lot of them with teachers, and we did a lot of them to encourage government school teachers to go back to their classrooms and be more engaged and to use Agastya's methods to then make their teaching more exciting. And many of them came back saying, I'm kind of happy about my job, because otherwise teaching in India is, not just in India, but in most parts of the world, it's a profession of the last resort. You kind of get into it because I've got nothing else to do or no other prospects. We didn't want that becoming an epidemic here, to say that that's the only kind of person you're going to be learning from, is one who's failed at everything else. We want teaching to be something teachers are passionate about. And all our best teachers, I think, would be the ones who weren't just reading out of the textbook, but who were stopping midway through a sentence and saying, wait a minute, just what do you think this guy means when he writes this? And you can't find that in the book. So you have to draw on your own creativity. You have to draw on a part of your mind which is interacting with the content rather than just absorbing it. And so when the government saw the initial science fairs, the scale of the science fairs, the footfalls, because kids were coming from surrounding villages, and this is before the campus, before the mobile van, anything. I think they were very excited to say that, okay, someone's trying to complement the existing system and we have to encourage them. So that's how we got the land initially, because there was a buzz around, okay, if you guys are going to build at that time it was a school that we were trying to build. And then when money didn't come in for the school, of course, the mobile van concept evolved kind of organically on its own. And the moment these vans started going out in the villages, there was again feedback from the government to say, wow, there's a buzz around the campus. Wherever you guys are doing this, there's just and more schools are calling saying, why can't they come here? And so that was great, because obviously the impact was seen. It was a non-profit doing it off donor funds and stuff like that. So the government was very happy to say, if you need support in terms of permissions, if you need support in terms of space. Today, Agastya has very little effort getting space for science centers, because a lot of the government schools buildings are quite spacious, and you get a room here and there is always easy to get. And then, of course, the Karnataka government came in and said, we'd like to do a collaboration and actually fund a part of your work, and then you guys, create the network that is there. Which is why in Karnataka, especially in North Karnataka, I think at one point, and maybe even now, there's kind of 100% penetration on government schools there. So we reach all of them. So that's the kind of thing government support can do, and it's picking up, and we're seeing it more and more. And I hope that continues.
Before we move ahead, just a small reminder to hit the subscribe button. But in addition to this, it was also more about the trust of parents of these young kids from rural India. How did that trust build? How did you get the first set of students who actually, the parents felt, okay, I mean, we can send our children to this school, and though it's not the regular textbook studies, but they're doing something, they're learning something, especially when you also know that every child contributes to bread and butter in such families as well. Yeah.
So one is, of course, we don't try and pull kids out of schools. The only kids that come to the campus are the ones from the surrounding schools. And those are more like class trips, you could say. So surrounding schools have a journey plan, or you could say Agastya buses go out and pick up kids from, say, 5th standard from that particular school, and 5th standard from maybe 3 or 4 other schools. And about 600 kids are on campus. But on campus, there's no syllabus being taught. It's pure interaction with science.
I'll
and
come to
creativity.
that. You have a very interesting campus, and we must discuss about it. Yeah.
But so I won't tread too much on that. But the idea parents realized that one is we were going during the school day. Teachers were happy because suddenly they get a couple of hours free. Kids were happy because from looking at their textbooks, suddenly they're coming out. There's a mobile van there. All these experiments are laid out. The experiments are curated at that time, of course, to the NCERT syllabus. So we knew that these kids, and we interact with the teachers and say, okay, what are they learning right now? We're going to bring stuff that's relevant to that. So it was very well aligned with their current syllabus. And so kids were extremely happy. It's like, imagine I'm reading a boring text, and then someone brings a comic book and says, by the way, this is the same story, but it's in graphic form. Suddenly you wake up and say, okay, let me read that. and then someone else. It's basically that. It's allowing you to play with what you were doing otherwise in the classroom. And so parents, I don't think ever had an issue because it was something that was adding to what their kids were learning. And to that point, we don't typically interact with kids past the 9th standard. Because again, we know that there will be pushback. There will be from the kids themselves sometimes to say that, look, boards are coming and we have to focus on that. So that aspect has still not changed, and it may never change. And to be honest, it's not just India. I think anywhere you go, 10th and 12th is crucial for a child. But we get them at 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th. And the idea is you create an intervention in those 5 years, which maybe they drop the string through boards or maybe through college, but there will come a point where they pick it up again, and it's nestled deep enough in them for them to say, wait a minute, am I applying creativity and curiosity to what I'm doing here? And can my work not be a lot better? So teaching kids that aspect of thinking is not something that's necessarily about what they learn in school. It can be applied to anything. And so if it's there and it comes back tomorrow, then Agastya has done its job.
But how does this entire thing change with YouTube? These days, YouTube makes it very easy for children to access such experiments. Is it still, why I'm asking this question is because to me, I think what you view on YouTube is still very different from what you experience. But let us know how it has it changed? Children come more informed there today than they used to 25 years ago, or it's still the same, or
That's a good point. I think, a lot of kids have access and so they know the content. But as we already said, content it's freely available. So, and not to say that the digital space isn't doing wonders in, again, spreading a lot of information that otherwise would be inaccessible to these kids. But, and we speak about this anecdote in the book where Ramji asked a student, I'll give you all the experiments, I'll keep them in your school. Do you still want the Agastya Igniter to come and interact with you guys? And they said, yes, we do. He's like, okay, I'll train your teachers. I'll set up a mini science center in your school. Do you still want? They're like, no, we want you to come. And finally he says, no, I'll give you all the stuff. You'd basically do you still need? And they said, no, we still want them. He said, why? He said, because he's the only one who treats us like a friend.
how sweet.
And
Okay.
it's something that I think the foundation has consciously
Done.
Because, again, we started off with Ramji was from Rishi Valley, and one of the things J. Krishnamurti said was about fear and education not being
True.
co-compatible. And so removing that fear was, I think, the number one priority right in the beginning, because you cannot get a child to interact or be really enthusiastic if they're scared that a wrong answer is going to get them shot down or called a fool or in any way belittle them in any way for that kind of... So that freedom of saying what they believe and then being confident and absolutely feeling that entitlement that I am allowed to express my thoughts and views. And again, I said it before, but when the girl children start doing it, it's a whole other dynamic. Because not only do they bring their own ideas, but it just adds another element of, I think the igniters themselves feel that, okay, now class is really on fire. And I think that's been one of the key successes of Agastya.
So the efforts have always been to be a friend more than a teacher.
Exactly.
And that's what's worked. But now coming to the journey of Agastya itself and the campus, Ramji has had his own set of challenges when he was setting this entire thing up. I think one of the key things that stood out in the book was, while all through you're talking about innovation in education, it was a very innovative way of setting the campus as well. Tell us a little bit about this aspect of, how did this journey start, especially when he himself was coming out from a good school. He was all well settled in life, and still he felt that, he needs to give back to the society and set up something so humongous, which at one point in time, I'm sure there would have been several instances where he felt that, how am I ever going to do this? So how did that entire journey start?
So his story, again, is outlined in the book. And yes, as you said, he was a banker. He was based in London, doing extremely well. And he'd worked very hard to reach that point. And I guess, like a lot of folks, felt maybe I've done enough, and maybe I'm, not doing something as soul rewarding as I could be doing. And being from Rishi Valley, being from that kind of alternative education background, he always had this feeling that it would be nice one day to do something in that space and create something similar to what I experienced. So the idea was actually to come back and start a school. And that didn't pan out because of various reasons, among them being funding. For better or worse, I would say for better, the dot-com bubble burst just around the time as they were about to take off.
Right.
And a lot of the funding that was promised was retracted, or otherwise people just said, look, we don't have the money we thought we did. And so, as you said, innovation became
a necessity.
Yeah, it being the media around which they themselves had to. So you're trying to sell this product and suddenly you realize, well, I need to start using it myself if I'm going to survive. And so the mobile van was a very creative way of getting science in a low-cost way to the villages. And it was allowing them to keep at least the, I won't say keep the lights on because that's a strange thing to say for a non-profit, but at least keep the idea alive to say we're doing something around education and let's see where this goes.
Right.
And it took off, obviously, and it really, really became something that the kids resonated with and reciprocated to such an extent that they said, okay, we struck upon a really great model here. And then that's how it kind of expanded from there, and when folks saw that they were trying not to build a school anymore, but to kind of do this, I think it created a different kind of connect. People are saying, okay, another residential school, that's one thing. But what you're doing here is completely innovative. And it's nothing like anyone has been even attempting to do at this point. So then a lot of folks came forward saying, yes, we see the vision here and we want to be a part of it.
So much so that Dr. Kalam himself visited the center and he, in fact, asked you to set something up in Bihar as well on the lines. Interesting. But then, again, talking a little bit more about this effort and this initiative and building up the entire center. You have a Mulika one there, you have a Termite Hill Biocenter there. Tell us a bit about this entire thing, how the entire center is set up. I'm sure it'll, as you are about, you impart education about, experiential education, it'll be more relevant for people to actually go and experience it. But just to get an understanding of how different this center is than from any other school or any other science center, so to say.
So one is it's huge. It's 172 acres.
Wow.
And one of the nice things early on was they were very ambitious with the space. When you have limited funding, you think, okay, I'll just build everything here. And then you have a lot of land all over the place. But they were very clear that no, stuff is going to happen and funds are going to come. And so what we're going to do is create a plan that is looking at the entire campus and imagining that we are in fact operating at that scale. And that was not just with the campus itself, but the entire mindset of the Agastya team has always been, we're operating at massive scale, which many companies that grow have to have that mindset even at the beginning. And so one was, of course, the ecological initiative. So it was a barren piece of land. I remember back in turn of the century when maybe I went there the first time, it was just white soil, which is, it pretty much tells you nothing is going to grow there. As Balram, one of the folks I interviewed, the first employee, said there was not enough shade to keep a water bottle. And it's true, there was no tree, there wasn't a single tree, there was shrubs, there was acacia saplings growing all over the place because it had invaded from the surrounding lands. And any iota of nutrition had been effectively sucked out and no rainwater would stay because the soil was so loose and so gravelly and so kind of, badly managed, you could say. It just lost all its life. That water itself would just flow through the campus and away. And so I think when they started, or when they got the campus, I think the idea was, okay, let's start doing something with it. But gradually the idea became that we can't really have a child come in here and see this and find any joy. One of the things about Rishi Valley that is so beautiful is it is absolutely nestled in greenery. And you look out of your classroom, there's trees there, there's birds cooing all the time. You just grow up almost taking it for granted when you study there. And so Ramji wanted to bring some of that back in as well. And so we got Yellappa Reddy, who was helping the Karnataka government at that time. And the moment he saw the land, it's like he understood what had gone wrong. And then he started giving us the blueprint for, okay, this is how we're going to reverse the effects. So he said, this is land that was very ancient. This was land that was, there's a Shiva temple in the mountain in the distance. So you could kind of tell that, okay, stuff happened here. This land was relevant at one point, but somewhere along the way, it's just been forgotten, and we're going to revive it by the naturalist ways possible. So it was all organic. It was very, very, as he called it, gentle manipulation, wherein we're going to introduce species that can survive here, and then we're slowly going to help them thrive, and then we're going to slowly literally build the fauna back from scratch. So he introduced spiders, for example, because he had a certain species of spider that he said would be extremely good, because the kind of bug that there was prevalent would be good for it. It was very almost weird and magical to kind of see the kind of way he devised the whole thing. And then, of course, organic efforts, planting saplings, supporting them with soil, with watering, ensuring that they at least reach a certain point where they can start, self-sustaining. And gradually the greenery started coming back. I think we were lucky that there were a couple of good years of rain. So, and again, rainwater harvesting was done. A lot of percolation collection points were made so that rainwater could be held at least at some point on campus and not just allowed to run right through. And then gradually the cycle started shifting in our favor. And you started seeing the spiders were there, but then the bugs came back, and different kinds of bugs came back, and then lizards came back, and then birds came because they wanted to eat the lizards, and snakes came because they wanted to eat the larger kind of creatures. And then suddenly you start seeing at the ground level there's a lot of buzz and there's a lot of activity happening. And then once the birds came, obviously the germination started taking off in a whole other way, and the soil started getting a lot more rich. And then gradually the confidence came to say, okay, let's start planting more species. Let's start seeing what else we can do. And so, yes, today you have peacocks, you've got wild boar sometimes charging through.
Wow.
Leopards have been spotted. And it's really a haven, you could say, an oasis in that area. And I think we write about this in the book, but the only bad press, you could say, Agastya got initially was from the surrounding villages, because Yelaparadi said, I'm not allowing any cow to come and graze here for the next at least 2 or 3 years, because we need to give the grass time to find itself. And people were upset, saying, why are we not being allowed to go there? And I think at last, that was maybe a few years ago, someone told me we give away about 10 lakhs worth of grass every year to the surrounding villages, because it's just growing, and now we can cut it and we give them. So it kind of illustrates, as I said, you have a circumstance which a child also goes through, and you don't have many tools at your disposal. But the ones you do have can kind of be gently manipulated to change that circumstance. Agastya did it almost with no money. And at each stage, the question was always, we can't be spending too much on this, because every rupee we spend on beautifying the campus is one less rupee that a child gets access to for learning. So it was always done with the idea that money is tight and we're going to be frugal, but we're going to try and, it was design thinking at its best.
But this is an amazing case study, even for ecologists and environmentalists. I mean, turning around an entire space from nothing to a green belt is amazing. It's an amazing story.
It is, and I should say, of course, the labs themselves are their own gems nestled in the campus.
Of course.
And Shahrukh Mistry, who passed away recently, who was the architect who built all this stuff, he came to Agastya at a time when, again, they had no money. And there was just these pipe dreams. We want to build this, we want to do this. And it just kind of clicked with him. It just resonated with him to the extent where he said, look, I'll waive all my architect fees and stuff. You pay for the materials, I'll get it built. And so the first few buildings were done on his, through his charity in that sense. And someone of his caliber giving that kind of thought and attention. And again, it was done very meaningfully and with a lot of concern to what materials are available. We're going to literally pull materials out of the ground and use that to build what we do, because we want it to look like this is part of the land. We don't want a Swedish-looking building suddenly in the middle of Andhra Pradesh.
Right.
I want the rocks and the stones to have the same color as the ground that surrounds them. And that can only happen if the architect really takes a lot of pains to design it that way. And so after the first few, then of course he built the auditorium, which is in the shape of a dung beetle, and he got the award for that. It won the national award for it. And after that, every building has been its own story in creativity and in what new wacky thing can we do. So when a child from a village comes and looks at this building, we just want them to be completely blown away. Just forget what's inside it. That's going to be amazing as well. We just want to have them to have this feeling that they're in a theme park and that this has to be the best place to come and learn.
You still continue with the concept of taking the mobile science lab a little bit further. So it's been on bikes, it's been on tabs, it's called Tekla bike, lab on a bike, lab on a tab. What are these concepts? How did this come about?
So the mobile van was started because we had these experiments that I think the Atomic Energy Center, Homi Bhabha Atomic Energy Center had already worked on. They were working on some hands-on models, and since we knew someone there, they said, look, we've already tried these out with graduate students, and so why don't you go and see if it works on kids, because the concepts are very much the same. And of course the feedback was amazing. The van, when it first went, was white, and so the idea of sending a white van to approach children is absolutely astounding. And unsurprisingly, they all ran away thinking either that it was some weird person coming, or that it was, I think some people thought it was a vaccination drive that was happening.
Yeah.
And so the kids obviously didn't want to be poked. And others thought it was a mobile van that they brought their phones to get fixed. And poor Balram had to tell them, no, that's not what we're doing here. And the moment the van opened and the kids saw what was inside, then that was a different thing. Now, of course, the vans are beautifully colored and you can see them driving around cities and it's an Agastya van because of how it's painted. But what we realized is, one is the van is, of course, quite expensive. The operating costs and the capital expenditure is on the high side. And it can only reach schools where road access is of that kind. It also requires two people. It requires an instructor and a driver. And this was something Agastya realized early on, almost kind of quite surprisingly, that teachers don't want to talk to the driver. And the instructor does not want to drive the vehicle either. So there was a kind of a class divide there that happened, where the teacher said, well, I'm a teacher.
I'm a teacher.
I'm of high repute and you can't make me drive a van. And even a teacher that was understood the mission and said, okay, I'll be saving, on the head count if I drive the van, would say that, look, I go to school and the principal's kind of looking around me to see where's the instructor. You're the driver. So this cultural issue was something that plagued us for a while until the bike was devised. And, so there was a Google bike, I think, or a Tekla bike, I think that was devised. And then the lab in a box actually came first, where we said we're going to put experiments in a suitcase and the instructor is going to use public transport to reach some of the very small schools, so delving deeper into rural India. And then Tyagu, who's Agastya's vice chairman now, had the idea that, look, just put them on a bike. And the bike can go pretty, it has no issue with road access. And suddenly you had this image of an instructor riding in on a bike, which is completely different from an instructor driving a van. You look cool, you look like this, rock star coming in, and the kids think you're like, this really cool teacher that's come. And the principal obviously also treats you with that kind of regard. And so it kind of solved one of Agastya's very core problems, both of reach as well as how do we lower the cost enough to go even deeper and reach more kids. So that now is the crux of the dissemination model. So we've got the vans, we've got the bikes, we've got lab in a box. Lab in a tab is, as you said, incorporates some of the digital stuff that we do, and that's still kind of evolving, so that kids can actually access some of Agastya's work on tablets. And then, of course, we have Operation Vasantha. And that's when Agastya started seeing that, yes, I think we see what they themselves weren't quite sure what they meant when they said we want to be a movement. You have this idea, you say, I'm going to put these ideas out there, and hope that it kind of synergizes and some kind of alchemy takes place, and somewhere this idea evolves into a movement. But it's not always easy to see how that's going to happen. And when Ramji went to a village once where they were doing some demonstrations at night for the parents, actually, because some of the parents were asking what is Agastya about. And so they said, okay, we'll come to your village in the night and we'll show you what we do so that you get a little more confidence. And then in the distance, he sees this girl in the corner just teaching some of the kids on her own. And so he went and approached her and said, who are you? And she said, no, my name is Vasantha. And I like doing this. In the evenings, these kids don't have anything to do. Most of them are up to no good, or there's some mischief going on. Their parents are in the fields. They haven't yet come home. So I use Agastya methods to teach them. And so this became Operation Vasantha, which we then expanded into about 600 villages across the country, where, again, typically a girl, and unfortunately in some cases the girl who's gone to college but the parents want her to get married, so they're like, you come back to the village. And so she's kind of there, stationed there. And so we give them a stipend, we send them a lot of the models. There's a lot of interaction that happens. So there's someone in Agastya who manages the whole program and makes sure that they are kept informed, and if training is needed and stuff like that. And this is what they do. They have a night school where they interact with these kids, and it's an added layer, you could say, of Agastya's involvement. And it was totally organic. It was an Agastya kid taking Agastya to the next level, which is what we then realized meant it was the beginning of a movement as we saw it.
How many states is it currently operational in? How big a spread is, while you have your campus in Karnataka?
Yeah.
But where all are you
So
active?
we are in 23 states as far as I'm aware.
Okay.
So it's pretty much everywhere except Kerala and most of the Seven Sisters. So I think even Borderlands, Assam has now started. So again, with the government support and with a lot of involvement. So that's been a big achievement for us, because it's really spreading our reach to that side of India, which I think also desperately and deservedly needs an Agastya intervention as well. And I guess we'll keep going, because wherever we've found we are able to involve, we've always found support from both the schools and the government. And it's generally, a bunch of good guys doing good work. So nothing to be...
And I think right at the core is the aspect of it being it following the ancient systems of Gurukul.
Yeah.
And I think that has always worked for India. So I think on that note, with 5 million kids, I think every year passing out, do you pass, are they called pass outs? Or?
No. We say we reach 5 million kids a year, but then that can be the same child maybe in the fifth. We may have also reached them. So it could be that. And again, that number is, there's a formula behind it. So obviously we take a lot of, there's conservative views sometimes, even though we know the reach is high. We say, okay, but we're probably reaching the same kid 3 times. So then we got to divide it by 3. So there is a whole calculation there that happens. But yeah, typically we say we've at least connected with about 5 million kids every year.
So with these millions of kids who Agastya has touched, how many success stories do you have? Where have they, some of the success stories which could set an example that, okay, coming from a village where they did not have access to even the basics, today this is what they are doing in lives?
So anecdotally, yes, there are stories that we have. But again, what we wanted to do, 2 things to keep in mind. One is, it was never about this child will go and do something brilliant. It was more about this child will find their identity and will find a better way of approaching problems. Having said that, what you hope is that when you instill that in a child, you should see at a population level a trend going in the direction that you hope it's going.
True.
Right? So a few of the stats that we look at, for example, is Agastya has a YIL, Young Instructor Leader program, where they spend more time with certain kids who've shown aptitude, who show a lot of interest, who are enthusiastic about learning science. And so Agastya will have a few extra sessions with them typically. We'll request the school if those kids can be sent sometimes to campus to interact with the instructors there. We found that these kids have an enrollment rate into college of about 98%. And so that's a big number to kind of look at. When you see the India average is about 22%, and the average in developed countries is also around 75, 78%. So you're actually giving them this huge boost in terms of what their prospects are post-school. So it's possible to say that, yes, out of 10 kids, if only 2 are going to go into college, and now almost all of them are going, you've
This is in
created...
itself,
Exactly.
True.
The other shift we've seen is in terms of professions.
Okay.
So when we track the professions of Agastya kids as opposed to what their parents were doing, you see this massive shift from the primary sector into the secondary and tertiary sectors. So that is something we hold very dearly to and say that, look, that means within a generation, what might otherwise take 3 or 4 generations, we're actually making a meaningful shift to away from, say, agrarian. And these kids are actually going on to do things that their parents probably wouldn't have imagined that they'd be able to do. And so those are a few of the things that we look at. There are metrics in place wherein we measure creativity, we measure innovative spirit, science knowledge, things like that. Those do happen at the school level. And there again, those are studies we've done over samples of maybe 300, 400,000 kids, wherein again you see there's a 10% increase between when Agastya does, say, 8, as we call them, interventions or exposures. At the beginning, we'd take a sample and we'd have a control group and we say, how are these kids placed on these metrics? And then we do the same thing at the end. And you realize there's about an 8 to 10% increase just with 8 exposures.
Okay.
So it not only says, okay, Agastya is having impact, but it also tells you, look, with just 8 exposures of creativity as the core, this is how much a child can actually improve. Imagine if this was part of their curriculum. Imagine if this was their way of life, that, you know, people generally thought this way, then how much it could actually impact them.
And in terms of the scalability of the initiative itself, we know that it's grown from one small place to, you know, several towns and cities and villages.
Yeah.
But how do you see this further scaling? How do you see this reaching much more, deeper into different parts of the country?
So we have Agastya 2.0 is now the
Okay.
vision that we've been speaking about. And I think that was initially, of course, around just before COVID. We were talking about it, then we had to take a breather because the pandemic came. And now the idea is we want to reach about 100 million kids by 2032 or 2033. And this, again, as you said correctly, is it's going to need a mix of digital and physical, what we call phygital learning, basically. So how do we combine the strengths of digital and the reach that digital gives us, but somehow not take away the joy and the interactive spirit that a hands-on learning can give. And so that's still very much an evolving thing that we're doing. And that's the reason we have the lab on a tab. It's the reason that we have a WeLearn app, for example, which was again developed during COVID. And so what we're trying to do is be very conscious of the fact that we don't want to just become digital knowledge transfer. That cannot be the end goal. So keeping both in mind and creating that balance is going to be the next step of Agastya's evolution, and it's happening as we speak. So I'm very excited to see what they come up with, because it's always been a case that they just, the creativity is in fact infused so deeply into the organization's DNA that when they do come up with a solution, you look at it and go, okay, I knew you guys would think of it. I just didn't realize that was going to be the answer. So.
And I surely look forward to doing something similar and trying to seek your help in getting this to Uttarakhand, the villages of Uttarakhand, because I think that is one space where I feel the children are exceptionally bright. They just need an opportunity. As Jiddu Krishnamurti said, that education is about removing fear. I do hope, wish and pray that Agastya continues to do this, expand, be bigger, I think create brighter and more creative students, an entire generation that, gives back more to making Bharat great. And thank you so much for your time, Adhirath ji. I look forward to having this conversation again in some time. And thank you again for making time for us.
Thank you.
If you want to continue listening in to such interesting conversations about Bharat, do like and subscribe.